Hi, everyone. We'll start off with talking about Jay Powell's speech this morning. Then we'll get straight into the charts. Then we'll go over my results for the day and my positions going into tomorrow. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So Jerome Powell spoke this morning, and there was a little bit of concern that he might say something a little bit unusual or new, but really he didn't. He basically stuck to the main script, saying that the Fed is going to stick to their mandate and they're going to continue to do things to bring down inflation, and that might bring some pain to the economy. You can see here they mention that they have to make tough decisions that might be unpopular, and then they also mention that they are not climate policymakers, which was a little bit strange. Obviously, they don't make policy. Obviously, their mandate has nothing to do with climate change. It's purely monetary policy, in my opinion, but he did make some comments on that. You can see here, once again, they mention price stability is one of their main concerns, if not their main concern. And then they say here, the speech did not give any direct clues on what they're going to do in February, if it's going to be 25 basis points or if it's going to be flat. I think those are really the two potential options at this point. I don't think they're going to do 50 basis points once again. I think they're going to do 25 basis points. They also mentioned that President Trump was ripping on the central bank for raising interest rates, and Senate leaders like Elizabeth Warren doing the same thing. So we have politicians on both sides of the aisle saying that the Fed is not doing the right thing. But of course, the Fed needs to do what it has to do to make sure that the economy functions correctly. And I would argue that both of these people don't really understand how the economy works very well, and certainly not the intricacies of the Federal Reserve or the economy. Moving over to the charts, starting with the hourly and 4-hour on the S&P 500, you can see we gapped down and then quickly recovered that and rallied throughout the session. I think this is generally the range that we're going to stick to at this point going into the CPI data. Certainly possible that we get a little bit of a fade off. You can see the hourly did tick into the green here just slightly. The 4-hour also showing a little bit of bullish momentum into the close. Jumping over to the daily chart here on the S&Ps, you can see we got that big rejection, engulfed the entire previous candle. So bullish. Looks like we might get a continuation tomorrow. Momentum on the daily chart is strong. We also stayed above the 50 RSI, indicating that we're still in that bullish trend. So overall, still bullish going into tomorrow, but understand that we do have CPI on Thursday. So I would expect there's probably not going to be a ton of volume or any major trends. You'd certainly look out for a potential bullish trade, at least in the short term. And I don't plan to hold any positions going into CPI once again, so I'll be completely flat going into Thursday. Moving over to the NASDAQ, similar thesis here. Just about the same, gap down, tested, rallied throughout the session, closed basically at the highs, which was just about at my max profit. So that worked out pretty well for my positions going into the day. You can see on the hourly, we did test the 50 RSI, bounced from there and rallied. Did not get overbought conditions here on RSI. It would be interesting to see if we do get that double top formation where the RSI ends up. I would guess that we're going to get some divergence. We'll get similar price action and a lower high here on RSI. Just seems like that's what's going to form. If we do continue to stay bullish, you can see momentum on the hourly. Looks like we're going to tick into the green going into tomorrow. 4-hour not giving a lot of indicators. We did get that one tick up here on the 11 o'clock candle, but continuing to stay basically flat. Jumping up to the 1-day chart, you can see momentum still ticking up solidly. And we did cross the 50 RSI on the daily chart, indicating still more bullish momentum to come tomorrow. And like I said, I think we're going to get that double top at least, come back up and test 275, and probably stay in that vicinity going into the CPI announcement. Moving over to IWM here on the hour and 4-hour, showing a ton of strength here today. Similar thesis, gap down, rallied throughout the session, but we actually broke the highs here, and it looks like we got just above resistance here on the hourly chart. Did get to overbought conditions already on the hourly as well. Very, very strong. Definitely the strongest of the three. It is a little concerning that we have a lower RSI reading on the 4-hour chart compared to what we had on Monday, despite the prices being a little bit lower on Monday. So we do have clear divergence starting to form. If this does tick down here and we get a little bit of a fade off tomorrow on the Russell, that would be some pretty clear divergence, and you would expect this to start to retrace a little. I do think there's a solid bottom in here at 172, 173 zone, but at this point it is a little bit extended and we're probably going to get a bit of a retrace. Again, I don't know necessarily that that's going to happen before CPI. Could certainly hold up into CPI, go sideways without any kind of major volume, but do keep in mind that we do look to have a little bit of divergence forming. Moving over to Tesla. Tesla did not keep with the thesis today, So we didn't gap down, but we also fell throughout the session. So we rallied just for a little bit through a big wick up to the highs and then sold off really aggressively and then kind of rallied through the mid session here, but was not able to get flat and ended up being a little bit negative on the day. You can see on the 4-hour chart, we are stuck below that 55 EMA, continues to be resistance. We'll see if we get a pop through there tomorrow. Certainly seems possible. Momentum on the hourly chart is moving to the upside slightly, although these steps down are not very fast. So that certainly seems like you could get a continuation to the downside, certainly seems possible. Usually you want to see steps like this where it's consistently down and then you get that consistent movement into the downside. But this switch to bullish momentum is happening very slowly and makes me think this is probably going to roll over going into tomorrow. It is worth noting on the RSI that we did come through the 50 on the hourly and bounce higher, did test the 50 on the 4-hour and bounce higher. So this will be interesting to watch. If we do come back through the 50 and stay below it, that's definitely going to be bearish. But if we stay above the 50, we could go sideways again into CPI on Thursday. Moving over to IYT, Transportation ETF. Not much to say here. Similar story, gap down, rallied through the session, closed right at the highs. That's what you want to see if you expect this to maintain its rally. Not in overbought conditions here on the hourly chart yet. This certainly seems like we have a couple steps down on bearish momentum moving into the bullish side. Certainly possible. It does seem like they might use CPI to push a little bit higher, take out all the stops, and then we get that rejection and push lower. We have talked about that several times at gap resistance. Zooming out here on the 4-hour chart, you can see we did take out gap resistance already on the IYT. And this can certainly take out the previous highs, come up to maybe 131 if CPI is solid. Come up to that zone, I would expect sellers to come in at that point, and then we get that rejection and the stronger move down, potentially through these lows. I still think we are in a bearish trend. We're just getting a short-term reach. But obviously, we have to wait and see if we're getting the signals for that to happen. Definitely don't predict that. Maybe CPI is really good and we push through these highs and start to make higher highs. Moving over to semiconductors. Similar thesis, gap down, rallied through the session, continues to be strong. This trend is intact here. We might get all of the EMAs in the same order soon, maybe tomorrow or the next day. We have the 921, 144, and 55 currently. If we get the 55 to bounce above the 144, that could be an indicator that we're going higher on. This sector has certainly been beaten down and it seems to be outperforming here in the short term. So that's definitely something to watch going into Thursday. It's also worth noting here on the daily chart that we did leave a gap behind. We do come up to resistance. Certainly seems like we could come back down, fill that gap, and maybe get a continuation as a potential thesis for this. Otherwise, momentum on the daily chart looking very strong, consistent steps down, consistent steps up into bullish. And you would expect this to come back up into overbought conditions on the daily chart based on what it's doing right now. Moving over to consumer staples, interestingly, this continues to be weak compared to semiconductors and growth. Moved down throughout the session, slight retrace on the 4-hour, didn't do much. Overall negative on the day, momentum continues to tick to the downside. Got below the 50 on RSI on the 4-hour, did not get back through the 50 on that slight rally. If we do get a rejection at the 50, that would indicate to me that we're going for prices here on XLP. So we're seeing a rotation out of consumer staples and into growth. Again, potentially indicating that maybe this rally has a little bit of legs and that people are willing to take a little bit of risk going into the new year. Moving over to top gainers for the day, we got Etsy putting up a really, really strong day, up almost 5% on the day. Here on the left, we have the 4-hour looking very strong, continues to tick into that bullish momentum. Currently in the green, and we see the EMAs moving into bullish territory here. Looks very, very good. Moving over to the daily side, you can see we got through the today. Momentum continuing to take consistent steps down, moving into that bullish territory. Certainly seems like this might push back up to the previous highs, maybe into that 144 zone, giving you a possible potential profit of about $13 a share here. I don't know if that's all going to happen before CPI, so definitely be a little bit careful there. CPI on Thursday morning could push this down or up really dramatically, so definitely control your risk there. But right now, this looks quite strong. We moved up. Solid basing formation, looks like a bull flag, broke out to the upside here, looks really solid. And then a potential another bull flag here if we do get a breakout. It is worth noting that there is some resistance right where it's at. I did draw this trend line real quick. It's touching pretty much all those highs right at resistance. If you do see a break of this tomorrow, again, could be a pretty solid indicator that Etsy is going to move higher. Moving over to the dollar, not a lot to say here. Slight bullish momentum, got back up to 103.40 at the highs, maybe 103.50, just short of that. basically tested the resistance we had here at 103.50 and then failed from there. And it looks like we went sideways throughout the rest of the session. On the daily chart, you can see we got a doji, potential reversal, but momentum on the daily chart is still negative. RSI is still quite weak, came back and tested the 50, broke below that, indicating a continuation to the downside based on the daily chart. Also, RSI on the hourly is still below the 50. Did test that level multiple times, so maybe some sideways price action. But if we do see this tick down tomorrow, that should be an indicator that the dollar is going lower and that stocks could be going higher here. I would be looking for a move below the 103.10 level. And obviously, if we take out these lows here at 103, that would be a really solid indicator that we're moving lower. Talked about this level here yesterday. If we do come into support right around 102.20 or 102.40, somewhere in that zone, that would be where I expect some more buyers to come in, which has been a level of support a few times at this point. But right where we are right now, there's not a lot of support, and you could certainly see a solid move down here in the DXY. Moving over to JNK, not quite what you want to see here on JNK. So we got the doji on the day, basically flat, very slightly bearish, indicating that we might be done on this little bit of a bull rally that we've had. Momentum is quite extended here at 25 here on the daily, which has been a cap multiple times here on momentum. We did get a bigger move higher on this push through October, which was pretty interesting. If you look at this is pretty hard to trade here. You'd be entering somewhere in this vicinity, somewhere around 88. And then you have a couple of down ticks and bull rallies without getting into the red here. So this is pretty tough trading here on the MACD. But over here, you got solid, consistent steps down, consistent steps higher here. If we don't get another breakout and consistent step higher, you have to assume that this is going to start pushing a little bit negative. You could certainly see conditions like this where you have some steps down, but price action moving very slowly higher here. But right now, JNK is not confirming a further push higher tomorrow. And I would be a little bit hesitant going into tomorrow, which is part of why I don't have any positions going into Wednesday. Moving over to TLT, we actually got some steps down here today. Momentum did start to fade at the end of the session. The 55 on the hourly continued to hold up. Right on the 144 EMA on the 4-hour as well as the 21, basically in the same location here. Continued to hold despite the big down move that we had today. But we are below that resistance that we have right here at 104. If we can't get above 104 going into tomorrow, this might be a little bit of a trap here now. So we have a high. So we have the high here at 109, 110 from that big move higher that we had. You can see what that looks like. If this creates a lower high here, then TLT might be a little bit done on this move. Certainly want to see this continue here, start to continue to make new highs. I don't know if it's going to do that before CPI. CPI could certainly push TLT higher if CPI comes in light and the Fed is going to go down to 25 basis points or maybe 0 basis points in February. That should push TLT higher. But right now, you have to be a little bit hesitant now that it took out this previous low, made a slightly lower low, and we're stuck at resistance going into Wednesday and then into CPI on Thursday. It is worth noting that we did not break the 50 on RSI here on the 4-hour as well. So certainly still possible that we get a push higher. But on the 4-hour, you can see we got well below the 50, and you'd want to see this come through the 50 before you trade to the bullish side. If we come up and test the 50 on RSI and move lower, that would be an indication that this is a retrace and that we are going to, in fact, be moving lower overall on TLT. Moving over to the VIX, finishing up with the charts here. On the hourly chart, you can see we got to oversold conditions here today, sold off pretty much throughout the session, gapped up slightly, tested resistance, sold off really strong, made a new low here. And we do have some slight divergence here on the hourly. So we have lower price action, but RSI is still higher than what we saw here on Friday. So lower prices, higher RSI. Certainly seems like we could see a pop from here on the VIX, but definitely be a little bit careful on that. We still have the RSI on the 4-hour showing very weak conditions. We also do not have that same divergence on the 4-hour. You can see we have lower RSI and lower prices on the 4-hour. And it's a little bit cleaner here going up above the 50 and then coming back through it, showing that bearish price action coming in. Certainly could see this push back down to that 20 level like we talked about in the Sunday video. If this comes back down to that 20 level into CPI, CPI comes out bad. We see the VIX reject off of that. You could certainly expect prices to be moving down in equities from there. And that certainly seems like a plausible thesis. Moving over to my accounts, did pretty well today, up about $780, got up above that $99,000 level, pretty close to $100,000. That'd be pretty cool to see that roll over into that 6-digit number. But otherwise, you can see I have no positions going into tomorrow. I had 2 covered calls on the QQQ, and those basically hit my max profit. They were both covered calls at the 271 strike. And my cheaper call was basically $180. So we closed the day at 272.85. So basically right at my max profit, which worked out perfectly. Otherwise, I have no positions going into tomorrow. Like I said, I'm a little bit hesitant. The JNK is giving me some pause. That doji certainly seems like it could move lower, which is generally a leading indicator for growth. Although growth has been leading and semiconductors are doing quite well. So definitely keeping an eye on that. If the dollar does break out to the downside, I might trade some short-term positions to the bullish side. But obviously, I'm not going to hold any positions going to CPI. I think we're going to get a pretty solid whipsaw, take out some stop losses, either to the lows or to the highs or in both directions. And then we'll see the market stabilize in one direction or the other. And then we can start trading that direction going forward. Let me know down in the comment section what you think the markets are going to do tomorrow. I really appreciate all of the subscribers I've been getting. It's been really good for the channel. Got up above 700 subscribers, which is awesome, and I really appreciate it. Like I said, I do this video every single day that the markets are open, as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading, and have a great day.